Hi, I'm Kelsey Schroeder, and this is my capstone presentation. My topic is teen pregnancy in Nebraska. Why did I choose this topic? I chose this topic due to the recent legislature that has passed in our country, as well as having a personal interest in helping teen parents. With the overturning of Roe v. Wade in 2022, it changed the outlook for many women in our country. With that reversal, women's rights to healthcare were left in the hands of the states, which offered no protection from the federal government. Prior to the overturning, we were actually seeing a decrease in teen pregnancy rates. However, according to a research study done by Georgia Tech, teen pregnancies are increasing in the states that have more strict abortion bans. In that same study, as of 2024, they showed that teen pregnancy has increased by 0.4% in Texas just since 2022, and that's the biggest increase we've seen in almost 2 decades. My personal connection to this topic is that I previously worked at a Title 20 daycare. At that daycare, they offered federal aid and accepted low-income families. So I was able to meet a variety of teen parents and hear about their situations and get a better understanding of how hard it was for them to receive that funding and help. The scope of the issue: in Nebraska, there are 14 teen births per 1,000 females, according to the CDC as of 2023. The national average is 13.6 per 1,000 females, according to the CDC of 2023. So with that, we are above average for the number of births in our state. Nebraska is ranked as 28 out of the 50 states with teen pregnancy as a high priority issue as of 2021. For demographics with this issue, in Nebraska, more babies are born to white non-Hispanic teen moms than any other race combined at 54%, taking responsibility for over half of our teen pregnancies. They were followed then by Hispanic moms at 29% and African American teen moms counting for 11%. And American Indian and Alaska Natives only 5%. And Asian and Pacific Islanders counted for only 2% of teen pregnancies in our state, according to the CDC as of 2023. So my solutions for this issue that I had proposed: first is preventative care, having education in school about pregnancy prevention, and then also having access to those preventions. In Vermont, they are one of 30 states that have mandatory sexual education. Nebraska is not one. Vermont mandates that sexual education be provided in schools with HIV and STI education, along with a comprehensive healthy relationship content, according to Wilmot's 2022. Vermont has one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates in all of the country. They have just 5.8 teen pregnancies per 1,000 females, according to the CDC as of 2022. My second solution is a program for teen parents. This program could help offer financial support, educational support, resource assistance, just helping the families get on their feet. New Jersey has a program similar to this called the Parent Linking Program. This provides free school-based services for the expecting parents. They also offer counseling, crisis intervention, intensive care management, and that's according to the Parent Linking Program as of 2024. Since 1990, the teen pregnancy rate in New Jersey has declined by 54% in the state as they have started to implement these programs, according to the CDC as of 2023. My first educated citizen is my Effective Communicator 1. During my first semester in the ICU, I got to the floor and had a patient assignment and learned that the patient was in the process of being declared brain dead. I had not had any experience with a patient in that situation before, and my nurse sort of explained the process to me. The patient was a registered organ donor, so after their declaration of brain death, they would be donating their organs. When we entered the room, the family was in there and they were pretty upset, stating that they didn't want the organs to be taken, that they didn't want him to be an organ donor. My nurse and I spoke calmly with them, and we explained that we understand where they're coming from, we understand their concerns and that we would look into what could be done for them. The family members started asking a bunch of questions. They wanted to know why the organs weren't already taken, why he was just laying there, why no one was trying to help him. And we kept ensuring them that their feelings were very valid and it was a difficult situation. And we had to keep them calm until the ethics committee reviewed the case. From this experience, I learned how important it is to listen as a part of being an effective communicator. The family just wanted their thoughts and feelings to be heard, and it allowed us to better understand the situation, that it really didn't have as much to do with the organ donation as it did of the fears of losing their family member. They felt that they had a lot of unanswered questions and concerns, and that made them uncomfortable with the donation. But after we were able to speak with them, they felt it was the best decision and they wanted to do what their family member wanted. Relating this back to my public issue, the experience in the ICU could possibly help by remembering that ethical dilemmas may be present and that our goal is always to help the majority of people. It is also a reminder that there might be many solutions, and it's important to look at everything from all angles and be sure of your decisions. For my second effective communicator, I was also in the ICU. The patient was a male who was very agitated. He kept trying to leave. He had pulled out 6 IVs. He was pretty confused as to where he was. He kept thinking we were people he knew. He was super unsteady and not able to walk. He wanted to get out of bed and kept pulling the IVs, and the family was in the room, and they were pretty concerned that he kept referring to the staff as different people. The other nurses in the room had been working with the patient, but not really talking with the family members, so I tried to help with speaking to the family members, and then my nurse called me over and told me that I would be putting in the new IV for this patient. I noticed that he kept grabbing with his hands, not only at his IVs, but just at a bunch of things, and I had handed him a washcloth and asked him to hold it for me, and he was holding it, and then I was just going with whatever he was saying, talking about the weather, talking about who the people were that he was talking about, who his aunt was, who his cousin was. And by doing that, I was able to get an IV started on him, which had been a big struggle for the day, and I just remained calm talking to him and got it all wrapped up. From this situation, I learned that it's important to remain calm even in those difficult situations when other people may not be as calm. The nurses all remained very calm and were talking to the patient and kept trying to reorient him as much as possible. I was able to learn how important that calm voice is, and sometimes you just need some redirection for the patient, and it was just able to keep him feeling busy and that he was being heard. Relating this back to my public issue, it's important to meet people where they're at, and with my public issue, remembering that it would be the teen population that we would be teaching, and that it would be important to teach them at their level of understanding instead of ours, and to ensure that they are thoroughly understanding and possibly use the teach back method. For my first reflective individual, this was a few years prior. My grandfather was diagnosed with vascular dementia and Alzheimer's, which had progressed, so he was then put into a memory care unit, and my grandmother was diagnosed with cortical basal degeneration, which is similar to Parkinson's, as it is plaque that builds up in their brain, and she slowly lost the ability to walk, talk, until she lost the ability to breathe and eventually passed away. They were in the same facility, so my grandfather, the nurses would take him down to visit her often. But after she passed, we had to find a way to tell my grandfather and do our best to ensure that he understood why he couldn't see her, as he was pretty prone to getting agitated. And we went into his room, and I just had him sit down, and I realized he thought I was my aunt, and I tried reminding him who I was, but he kept asking how Mom was, referring to my grandmother. And he took a moment and seemed to like remember, and I said, "Do you remember that she's sick?" And he seemed to understand, and I told him that she had passed away that evening and that she was now in heaven. And he had stared for a long while and kind of cried silently for a moment, and then he said, "Is she done suffering?" And that was not what I expected him to say, as I wasn't sure how there he was that day, and it was always hard to tell how much he was actually understanding from what we had said. With that, I had ensured him that she was at peace and no longer suffering, and he seemed very warmed by that. From the situation, I learned that even though experiences may be super hard and the situations might be tough, it's important to be an effective communicator during those and convey the right message, even though it might be difficult. I felt I was able to do this with my grandfather, and I was able to use verbal and nonverbal communication. I allowed him time for questions and for him to have emotions, which I felt was very important, to always allow people to feel their feelings. Relating this back to my public issue, I was able to show compassion and kindness, and I will continue to do that in my nursing career. And as my public issue, these techniques can be used in my project, as well as teens may be going through difficult times as they may not have intended for their pregnancy. For my second reflective individual, it was last semester. I was at Methodist, Maine, and we had a patient who had mouth cancer and had reconstructive surgery for that. She had like a muscle flap and skin grafts placed, and she was super swollen in the mouth still and had come back due to that swelling. The patient was calling, saying that she was in pain, and she had hit her call light a few times, and the CNA had answered. And then my nurse peeked her head in and said that we'd get her medication soon. And we got sidetracked doing something else, and about 15 minutes later, she was hitting her call light again. She was very agitated. She was crying. She was demanding the medication. She was yelling and very upset. And my nurse was very frustrated with her and kind of stomped out of the room angrily to go get the medicine. And I was able to stand there and talk calmly with her. And later that day, she called again after we had gotten the pain meds, maybe an hour later, and she called, and I had answered, and she apologized for being so upset and said she usually didn't act like that. She was just in a lot of pain, and that this situation is very hard for her. From this experience, I was able to really understand the importance of putting yourself in someone else's shoes and being able to see things from other people's point of view. Each person has diverse needs, experiences, along with pain tolerances, and it's important to read the situation and listen to the patient about their own experiences. I felt very bad for my patient because it was clear in her eyes that she was in a lot of pain, and the way my nurse had acted made me feel very uncomfortable, and that I was glad that we were able to help her. Relating this to my public issue, although it doesn't directly relate, it's important to remember that our past situations can influence us to be better people in the future, and to reflect back does not only apply to school but in life in general, and we should always be trying to learn and grow as people. For my first change agent, I was on my hospice rotation at Methodist. I was extremely fortunate to follow a nurse practitioner that day, and she was very good with the patients, and it was a very difficult side of nursing to see. We had a patient who had stage 4 cancer who was receiving palliative care, and they were considering transitioning to hospice. And my nurse started to discuss with the family what the differences would be. And she was telling them how she understands it's like a very difficult situation. And the family stopped us and said that they view death differently due to their culture and religious beliefs, and that they believe that death is a beautiful and peaceful journey back to their God, and that their patient, she doesn't fear death, and it was a long waited for them to finally earn their place back with God. And with that, we then realized that we were going to treat the situation differently, and my nurse was able to change the number of visitors allowed, as this was shortly after COVID and they were limiting visitors. We got the number of visitors allowed extended for them, as it was important for them to be surrounded by their family members and their pastor. We were able to accommodate them by getting extra chairs and items in the room for the family and make them more comfortable. We also had the family brought in certain things to make the patient more comfortable. From the situation, I was able to learn a lot, especially from my following the nurse practitioner and her response to the family and her needs. She went above and beyond to provide that culturally competent care, which is always so important. I was able to learn how important it is to learn the beliefs of your patient, as they may not be the same, and it's important to be open to new ways of thinking and to be supportive of whatever their ways of thinking are. And we were just able to make a difficult time in their life that much easier. From this issue, excuse me, I was able to relate this back to my public issue, as teens who become pregnant need certain assistance, and the goal of mine is to prioritize that and provide culturally competent care and making sure that people receive the best experiences that I can possibly give them. For my second change agent, I was able to demonstrate being a change agent in the OB clinic during my preceptorship. We had patients who would come in regularly for their checkups. They'd be here every 2 weeks or so. So I was able to continue seeing some of the same patients over and over again over the weeks. And one day we had a patient who was pregnant and she was late for her appointment, and I had heard that the doctor was calling up to the front desk to mark them as a no-call, no-show. And I spoke to my nurse and I reminded her about a conversation we had with the patient at her last appointment, where she had informed us that she was living at a homeless shelter and that they had to schedule transportation, and she was having a difficult time making her appointments, and she was asking if there was a different schedule she could be on, because coming that often is very difficult for her to get the transportation she needs, as she doesn't own a car. And after we relayed this information to the doctor, she called the front desk and let them know that if she showed up, to let her be seen and that we would still have time to see her. And it turned out that the patient was running late, as she couldn't get transportation from the shelter. She had to rely on a friend. And I was able to just advocate for this patient and allow her to be seen, even though regularly she wouldn't have been. From this situation, I learned that it's important not to make assumptions about other people's situations, and to take time to actually get to know your patient and their situation and find ways that we can help provide them with equitable care, and that not every patient comes from the same background or circumstances, and they may need their care slightly different from each other. Relating this back to my public issue, the experience I had at the clinic was important, as people come from various backgrounds, as would the teen parents, and it is important not to have biases surrounding people. When you can see people with a fresh pair of eyes and not have any preconceived notions, you're able to provide better care. Overall, the Educated Citizen Reflections are useful in so many areas of life, including in my public issue project. The population that I was following as the teen pregnancy in Nebraska needs more access to education as well as resources, as changes to the federal law have changed how much aid this population needs and have greatly increased. With knowing that and knowing how to be an effective communicator, I can help better educate those who need the aid in this population and help communicate with lawmakers and people who are unable to help enact that change. And as a change agent, I can help enact the change with my issue and start working on steps to help them. Being a reflective individual also helped me to use past experiences to make the best plan moving forward. Thank you so much.